Apologist Greg Banhsen thinks atheists can't reason, then sets out to prove that exactly the opposite is true. So once more into the breach, my friends, as we touch on presuppositionalism and why the religious don't understand reality. There was a time, way back in the day, when I actually knew Greg Banhsen. I mean, we weren't friends by any means, but we knew each other, and we ran in similar circles and lived very close to each other, so we saw each other a fair bit. And yes, now I recognize what a wingnut he was, but at the time, I had a lot of respect for him and others like him. Of course, Greg died in 1995, but apparently his words live on, and only his words in this video because an apologetics channel posted part of a speech and I'm going to take a look. Or a listen. You know what I mean. And this is why presuppositionalism is so utterly absurd and why there is literally no reasoning whatsoever that gets you from reality to this ridiculous religious insanity. So here goes Greg Banhsen thinking atheists can't reason, and why he's only proving that the reverse is true.
You are talking to a materialistic atheist who says all of reality is physical in nature.
Well, that's the only thing we actually have any evidence for. And this is one of those places, one of many, many places, where I don't think the religious understand what's being said to them, or maybe they do understand and are purposely inventing straw men for theological purposes. I don't know. But I have never heard an atheist ever say that the material is all there is, period, full stop, end of statement, that's all she wrote. It's always, this is what we have evidence for, and therefore this is what we'll accept until something else comes along. But religious apologists, seemingly all religious apologists, play this "there's nothing but the physical" straw man, often so they can trot out the silly, "what about your thoughts? Are your thoughts physical? Or love? Is love physical?" Well, yes, all of it is, or at the very least it comes from a physical structure within the universe. But they don't like that, so this is not off to a good start.
If all of reality is physical in nature, where is the class or what is the category of humanity?
Physical. We're just a physical being. We're just an animal. And I've had lots of theists argue with me on this because they're acting on ego, not intellect. They don't want to be just another animal running around on a backwoods planet in the middle of the universe's asshole. They don't want to recognize that in the grand scheme of things, if there was a grand scheme of things, we're entirely unimportant. They want to pretend that all of reality revolves around us. These people are idiots.
Is that a physical thing? Put your thinking hats on now. Be good philosophers. Is the class of humanity a physical thing? I'm not asking, are humans physical? That's easy, yes. Touch ourselves, we're physical. But is the concept or class known as humanity physical?
Yes. It doesn't matter how you try to spin it, we are physical. Everything about us is physical. There is nothing that we can detect in the universe that isn't. It doesn't matter how that makes you feel, it matters what is demonstrably true.
Could anyone put that in their refrigerator and cool it down overnight? No. Could you kick it? No. Could you swallow it? No. Could you burn it? No. Could you trash it? No. You can't touch it, can you? Because it's not physical.
Well, you're talking about a word which is conceptual. And if you want to play that game, and that's what this is, a game, then nothing is physical because all language is conceptual. A brick is real. The word brick is not. But as I pointed out, all of these concepts occur within the human brain, which is a physical object and outside of which these concepts fizzle into non-existence. So the concept, the class of humanity as he wants to put it, relies on the physical to have any meaning whatsoever. He's just wrong.
How about the class of mortal things? Is the class of mortal things physical?
But it relies on the physical. And when you think about it, the word, just like any word, is just an electrochemical reaction within the human brain. So that makes it physical, at least in some sense. We can detect it. In fact, we're getting pretty good at it. We can, to a certain degree of accuracy, actually see what people are thinking. Using an fMRI machine, researchers can detect what someone is seeing solely through reading their brain state. These are not just ethereal ideas floating around in the ether. These are caused by electrical impulses inside your brain, and without that going on, none of this exists at all.
Now, is any class physical? Is any set physical?
Again, yes, for the reasons I've previously given. Because the class of mortal things ceases to exist in any meaningful way without a human mind, or at least an intelligent mind, to conceive of it. And of course, every single member of a class of mortal things is indeed physical. So this is really going nowhere fast.
Now, those of you who were here last year, don't steal my thunder, but let me just show you how far this goes. When the unbeliever wants to do reasoning, let's just say it's mathematical reasoning. And the unbeliever says, okay, we know certain deductive relationships, such as 2 plus 3 equals 5. Okay, now I have a question for you philosophically. Those of you who were not here last year, don't jump, those of you who were not here can answer. Is this 2 up here on the board? And is this 3? And is this 5? Have I got that right?
I'll have to take his word for it since this is just an audio recording and I can't see the board, but I do have to point out that the only reason that we have a concept of 2 or 3 is because we as human beings made them up. If it hadn't been for some kind of intelligent mind, and I'm saying it that way to allow for aliens if they exist out there anywhere, but if it hadn't been for a physical, sentient, intelligent brain somewhere, the idea of 2 or 3 would be meaningless. Without the brain, the universe would go on, but all of these concepts and ideas wouldn't exist.
Is this 2? It is. You want to think about it again? Because if that is 2, we have now just destroyed 2.
Wrong, because different people write different numbers in different ways. Here's the numbers written in Chinese. Just because you don't recognize the Chinese symbol for 2 as 2, that doesn't mean it isn't 2. Or here are some in Japanese and Cherokee. Same thing, or other languages. And this doesn't just go for numbers, it goes for anything. Just because you don't understand the meaning of the symbol for tree, that doesn't stop it from meaning tree. And you can just invent a word to represent anything you want. It's how new words are created after all. You can make up your own language, and it's every bit as valid as any other language on the planet, just with very few people who can actually understand it. This is the problem with presuppositionalism. It's just downright irrational, and it doesn't comprehend the world that we actually live in.
There is no more 2-ness in this universe.
If there is no representation of 2 on that blackboard, that doesn't mean that the concept of 2 ceases to exist. So long as you understand what 2 is, whether or not it's written down, 2 exists conceptually. And when you die, when your brain stops processing the idea of 2, so long as other people understand it, then the concept goes on without you. It might be written differently, it might sound differently in another language, but the concept of 2 exists whether or not you do. It is bigger than your brain, but it still relies on a brain to keep going.
If you tell me that's 2, and I blank, actually a blackboard's better if I can erase it, but you get the point. There is no 2 anymore. Now, do you want to reconsider what you just told me? Was that 2? That wasn't 2, that was the numeral 2, which is a representation or instantiation of the concept 2.
Yeah, I already spelled that out in great detail, but thanks for that, I guess.
All right? And so here you have the unbeliever who's talking about an immaterial, non-physical set of things known as human beings. An immaterial, non-physical set of things known as mortal beings. An immaterial set of things known as two-ness. All those things which have two-ness about them.
All of which are concepts that exist only within a physical brain. Even if there were mortal beings, for example, if there were no sentient brains to invent the concept of mortal beings, the idea would not exist. The things that the idea describes would, but the idea itself would not. That's why we have to differentiate between things that are real and things that are just concepts. Things that are just ideas that exist in our brains and nowhere else. Things that we just made up to describe observations. Because all of the things that Greg describes are exactly that. Observations made by human beings, described in terms invented by human minds. All of it requires physicality to exist at all.
Is that physical? Is that something you can go to the refrigerator and say, hey, I think I'm going to pull 2 out of the refrigerator tonight? 2 what? Forget it. Not 2 what, just 2. I'm going to pull 2 out of the refrigerator. You can't do that.
Yeah, because you're an idiot.
Do you understand the words that are coming out from my mouth?
Don't nobody understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, man.
And you can't pull humanity out of your refrigerator, and you can't burn Gary North. Or Gary DeMar, for that matter. The set, the concept, you cannot do that. Why? Because the concept's not physical.
And no one says they are. You're humping a straw man, Greg, and you'd know it if you weren't dead, but your followers didn't figure it out either, because they're no brighter than you were.
How about the laws of logic? Are laws physical things? How many of you think it's possible you go to the cafeteria tonight, they say, we're serving the laws of logic? You know? As you. No, you can't touch the laws of logic. They aren't physical, they're conceptual. Okay, I belabored the point, but do you understand what's going to happen now?
Yes, you're going to take all of your crazy misconceptions about reality and double down on your own religious stupidity and try to flog your ridiculous straw man some more to impress the clueless audience that you have. That's what's going to happen. Let's watch.
The last step is I say to Mr. Atheist here, since for you everything that exists must be material or physical, for you there can be no laws of logic or class concepts. There can be no numbers, there can be no concept of humanity, there can be no class of mortal beings, there can be no laws of logic. And if for the atheist there can be no classes and no laws, there can be no deduction.
Which is just stupid. It just proves that Greg didn't know a thing, or probably more properly, that Greg was convinced that his followers were ignorant idiots who wouldn't know any better if he just spun a bunch of lies and irrational idiocy to reinforce their absurd faith. That seems to be much more likely, given what we see in so many other apologists, presuppositionalists and otherwise, doing effectively the same thing. And that's why it is so amazingly easy to rip apart their ideas, because it only takes looking at them critically and skeptically and realizing that, hey, this makes no sense at all if you don't already buy into this load of nonsense uncritically. It's why presuppositionalism is so stupid, because they're pulling unsupported claims right out of their asses and insisting that it has to be true, and if you won't accept it after the ridiculous repetition and blatant bullying, they pick up their marbles and stomp off for home, declaring victory all along the way. It's not just that their ideas are so stupid, which they are, it's the fact that they're such a one-trick pony, that they have literally nothing else to present once you demolish their ridiculous claims. They have nothing to fall back on, which is why debates with the presuppositionalists tend to be such spectacular disasters, because they can't admit they're wrong, and they have nothing else to say. And they have attitudes which are completely unwarranted. It's just Silly. But then again, so is religion. So I guess that's no surprise.